I used to work nights at a 24-hour fitness in New Jersey. I had a love-hate relationship with these ships. I loved it because very few people would come in during the deep night hours, meaning less people checking in and less waits I had to react to. I hated it because the man I had to spend the graveyard hour sitting on a desk doing nothing while everybody else was asleep. Still, maybe you would think many strange things would happen during these hours, or maybe you wouldn't. It's a gym. What could happen? Actually, only one strange incident ever happened while I was there. I was sitting in a chair behind the counter, reading a magazine. Then, out of natural curiosity, I turned to watch a few people. Well, I guess you would call it a person watching, because there was only one guy in the gym. He wasn't doing anything, though. He was kind of just pacing slowly down the gym, looking around. There's a cutoff between two different sections of the gym, the fronts and the back. He made a left turn past the wall that separated the two sections, and then he disappeared from my view. So, it was back to reading for me. 10 minutes passed, and I forgot the guy was even there. Then suddenly, everything went dark in silence. Like literally the power in the gym just shut out. All the lights turned off, and all the music went dead. It was so dark, I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me. Thank God our phones have flashlights these days. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what to do. I turned it on and tried to think of what I should do next. I knew some kind of power box was in one of the storage rooms connected to the back section of the gym. I also knew that's exactly where the one guy working out happens to be. On my way there, phone's flashlight in hands, I called out for the patron over and over. Now I was in the back section, still calling for him. Why on earth would he not answer me? There was something so eerie about being in a silent, pitch-black gym and seeing all the workout equipment only through a flashlight. I found the power box in the back storage area, or I guess what I thought was the power box. I tried flicking on and off every possible combination of switches, but the power did not come back on. Since I couldn't figure it out, I guessed it was on me to close up shop and wait for Kathy, the owner, to come fix it tomorrow morning. But first, I had to find that guy. I did a thorough scan of the whole back section, behind all the equipment and all the janitorial closets. Nothing. The only other place I could check back there was the women's bathroom. I opened the door and called for him once more. My voice echoed into the seemingly empty bathroom. Still, I had to double-check to confirm. I made sure to point the flashlight in every possible direction so I could see every inch of the bathroom. She only placed a check now where the stalls. Before I could open either of them, though, I started to hear noises, breathing noises like sickly, deranged breathing noises. I had my hand on the door, ready to push it open, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I said, "Are you in there?" No answer. I got on my knees and looked under the stall door with my flashlight. There were 2 legs standing right behind the stall door, practically inches from my face. He was literally standing on the other side of the stall door. I quickly got up and left the bathroom, heart racing. I ran to the front desk and tried to figure out what to do. I tried calling the owner, aka my boss, but obviously she was asleep by this time. I left 2 different voicemails on her phone. The only other thing I could think to do was call the cops, and so I did. I didn't know what else to say, other than there was a suspicious man in our gym, and I was 90% sure he somehow cut the power. I hung up the phone and felt alone and horrified in the darkness and silence. Suddenly, a metallic hit sound came from across the dark gym, like one of the machine's weights being dropped. I shined the light down the gym and called for the patron once more, and then called out that we're closed and that he had to leave. Then I think I saw him. I saw someone walking between 2 machines before getting too far from the light to see. It seemed like he was messing with me now. I shined the light in the direction that he was walking, and I swear to God, it looked like just at the edge of the light, there was a face looking at me. The blue and red lights from the cop car outside lit up the front section of the gym briefly. A cop knocked on the now dysfunctional front door and I physically opened it to let him in. He took out his flashlight, greeted me, and said he'd take a look around. All I saw from the front desk was the light of the officer patrolling the whole entire gym, including bathrooms and closets, before coming back to me and saying it's empty. He suggested that whoever it was left through the back door and that I should lock up and come back tomorrow morning, and that's exactly what I did. By the time I got back the next morning to check on things, Kathy was already there. Apparently, it was just a simple power outage the night previous. Kathy and I checked the camera footage together, and those brief moments before the power went out, we checked for the guy I described, but he wasn't there. There was no footage of him entering the gym. There was no footage of him working out, or even just walking around the gym. Kathy looked at me like I was alone, but I was too frozen with shock and confusion to care. I swore up and down to her that someone was there that night. To this day, I don't know if she believed me. I don't even know what to think of that night. But I know I saw someone there that night, regardless of what the cameras might have shown. I joined a gym for the first time 3 months ago. Now a gym is really the last place you'd ever expect something scary to happen. But last week, I had the most horrific experience of my life. I wear one of those wireless headphones when I go to the gym because the wired ones always get in the way and they're just annoying. Sometimes I'll leave my phone on a workout machine when I walk to the water fountain, and when the phone gets too far from the headphones start getting staticky before disconnecting. I only knew because it happened a couple times before, when I walked away too far from my phone in the gym. Well, one late night last week, I was one of the last people still in the gym. I was on one of the seated leg machines. I began my set of 20. While I was pushing towards my final reps, the music in my headphones started getting staticky until my headset said disconnected from phone. I stopped my set and reached over to the phone compartment on top of the machine, and I was filled with worry when I couldn't feel my phone. It wasn't there. I looked around the gym desperately, thinking someone might have taken it. I only saw 2 other people in the whole gym though, excluding the guy sitting at the front desk. One guy was really fat and sweaty, and the other guy was sitting on one of the machines, looking down on his phone. Which one could have taken my phone, if either of them? I had to approach the guy sitting on his phone as much as I didn't want to. He had earbuds in, so when I approached him, he looked at me with a confused look on his face, as if he didn't want me to be talking to him. He took one earbud out and looked at me, and I firmly asked him, "Did you take my phone?" He looked at me in silence for a couple seconds, then said, "No." There was an obvious attitude. I asked him if he saw anyone else walking by recently, and he just shook his head. No. For some dumb reason, I said thanks and walked away. When I deep down wanted to tell him to quit being a dick, I went to the front desk and asked the worker to check the video cameras and see once and for all who actually took my phone. As the guy working in the front clicked around on his computer, the rude guy who I spoke to walked past me and out the exit. The worker then turned the computer screen so that I could see it and clicked play on a video which showed the guy who left 15 seconds ago taking my phone. I thanked the employee and ran to catch the guy who just left, but by the time I got outside, the guy was nowhere to be found. The scary thing that sunk in right away was the fact that I recently disabled my passcode blocks my phone, meaning he had access to all of my apps, all of my texts, pictures, emails, all of my data basically. I went back inside, and that's the employee to track that man's membership info. But when he checked the cameras, the guy didn't even check in. He simply walked past the counter unnoticed, so there were no records of this guy even being a member of the gym. The footage showed that he suspiciously walked around between machines, looking around a lot like a nervous person. I asked the employee to report that to the police. He said he'd show it to his boss tomorrow. The next day, I called my best friend, Tom, so I could tell him why I wouldn't be answering texts for a while, and to also see if he could tell all my other friends. What happens? He started freaking out on the phone, begging me to tell him I was kidding about losing my phone. He told me someone had been sending him texts and came to his house. I didn't understand, so he said he'd be over to show me. 10 minutes later, Tom got to my house and showed me a long conversation between him and someone using my phone pretending to be me. It started out with the person on my phone saying, "Hey, can I stay at your place tonight? I got in a huge fight with my parents." Tom said, "Yeah, let me know when you come over." Then the guy who was using my phone said, "Can you just leave your back door open? I'm going to be over super late and I don't want to wake you." The conversation went on a little while longer before Tom finally agreed to just leave his back to her unlocked. Tom went back to sleep under the impression that it was actually me who would be coming through that back door. When we finished reading the conversation, Tom looked up at me and said, "The cameras." We rushed to his house together and watched the footage captured on the cameras throughout his house. I was disturbed but also not surprised to see that man from the gym who took my phone walking in through the back door of Tom's house. He scavenges the place, grabbing expensive household objects and throwing them in his pockets. He moves from the den to the kitchen and eventually to the upstairs. I saw the fear in Tom's face when he watched the man on the camera on the upstairs hallway open his bedroom door, step in for about 20 seconds, and come back out, leaving the door open. The man was in the house for about 10 minutes before sneaking back out the back door. It looked like he took a lot of valuables. Tom and I sent the video footage to the police, and when I went back to the gym, the manager told me she'd be sending their footage as well. 3 months later, not a word from the police. So whoever stole my phone and snuck into Tom's house got away with it scot-free. I currently go to a 24-hour gym in my town. It's usually on the quieter side most of the day, but during the night hours, it really becomes a ghost town. I don't quite understand how they could afford to stay open 24/7. I had to work late one night to cover for someone else's shift, so I got off work at 11 p.m. I planned on heading right over to the gym to get a quick midnight workout in. When I got there, nobody else was there. I was the only one working out. Well, only for about 10 minutes, and so I finally spotted someone else working out. It made me feel a little less odd for being there so late. The guy was wearing a beanie and a hoodie. I was sweating just looking at him, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it was cold out, but it wasn't cold in the gym. I barely had enough time to analyze his odd clothing decision before he started staring me down. I looked back for as long as I felt comfortable before deciding to look away. I felt like he seemed to be challenging my dominance because I still felt his stare through my peripheral vision. I kept shooting brief looks back at him to still find him staring at me. I tried my best to ignore it and went on with my workout. I just couldn't take the starting anymore though, so I went to a different section of the gym where there was absolutely no one around. I was finally able to work out in peace. I was doing bicep curls by the free weights while facing the mirror. That's when I noticed it. That guy in the beanie was hiding behind one of the chest press machines. There was a slight opening between the lifting mechanism and the actual weights on the machine, and through that opening was the guy's face. Once again, staring at me. I think when he realized that I noticed him, he moved away out of sight behind the machine. I'm way too timid a person to go approach anybody like that. So instead of confronting him, I put the weights down and left the room. I walked straight to the front desk and asked the girl working to tell the man to either stop staring at me like that or to leave the gym. She looked down the aisle of workout machines and saw nobody. I asked her to come follow me. She was clearly very reluctant to do so, but she ended up coming with me to the back room. We looked around the room, but he wasn't in there. In fact, it seemed like he wasn't even in the gym anymore. I apologized and told her to keep an eye out for the man in the beanie. She walked back to her desk, and I kept working out for another 10 to 15 minutes. I waved goodbye to the girl as I left the gym and went to my car. As they put the key in the door lock, I heard footsteps hitting the concrete. I was confused at first. It sounded like somebody running in my direction. I turned 180 degrees. Someone was sprinting towards me from the dark. I stood like an animal, frozen in headlights for a second as I stared in shock. When the person emerged into the circle of light onto the light post I was parked under, I was able to instantly recognize the guy in the beanie and hoodie from earlier. I opened the car door and jumped inside, slamming it shut behind me. I slammed my hand down on that tiny lock knob atop the door handle a split second before the man tried to open the door. As I started the car, he started to kick at my door and window. I threw the handle into reverse and stepped on the gas. The car jolted backwards away from the man, and I was able to escape the parking lot safely. I got home and found a bunch of dents in my door from the man's kicks. Admittedly, I should have called the cops, or even the gym, and warned the girl of the men now that she was alone. Instead, I selfishly just went to bed and told myself I would never go to the gym late at night again. I made the mistake of searching the deep web one time. I saw and read it. Some people are talking about this thing called Tor that allows you to search the deep web, and it was basically post asking for the strangest things people have come across on the deep web. It intrigued me, some of the things people have found, so I went along and downloaded Tor. Someone on Reddit posted a link to a basically hidden wiki with a bunch of useful links to the dark web. I was shocked at how many child pornography links there were. I did my best to steer clear of anything like that. I did come across a link that took me to another page with a bunch of links called the Black Pages. The page was black with a bunch of red and yellow links. The red pages seemed to be the strangest. There was one link called Personal Assassin and another called Dead Pets. Reading some of those links, I realized how messed up this whole deep web thing really was. I clicked a yellow link and ended up at yet another page full of links there. I found something that seemed interesting. It was called the Secret Society chat. I clicked on the link, and it took even longer than all the other pages took to load. I'd say I stared at a blank white screen for a good minute before the page finally turned black and the chat box popped up. Next to the chat box was a black video screen. I wish that I just clicked the back button at that point, but instead I typed "Hey" in the chat box. What happened next was weird. Someone wearing a mask sitting in a dark room popped up on the screen. I felt like my heart stopped when I saw my face pop up on the screen as well. The website was using my webcam, even though I naturally keep it off. I covered it with my thumb and tried to close the page, but at this point, my taskbar was gone along with the minimize and exit buttons at the top of the Tor window. I tried hitting Ctrl-Alt-Delete, but it did nothing. And then there was a muffled, distorted voice coming from my speakers. I could only assume it was the guy in the mask speaking. He was masking his voice with some kind of voice changer. I clearly remember he said,
"I still see you, James."
My heart sank when he said my name. I began holding the power button on my laptop, and it felt like an eternity before it finally cut power. I didn't know if I should report what happened to the police, but from what I knew, everything was anonymous with Tor, so it didn't even seem worth it. It was obviously just a low-life hacker. I went on with my life after deleting the Tor browser from my computer, but about 2 weeks later, my mom threw a letter in my room. She told me it came in the mail for me. There was no return address on it. I ripped the letter open and unfolded the paper tucked inside in huge letters that filled the paper where the 3 words "don't come back." I felt like I was going to throw up from the sickening feeling it gave me. I crumpled up the paper and threw it away. I didn't call the cops as the team's pointless, and I didn't tell my mom because it would only cause her to panic. But I have no idea how or why they got my address. My worst experience on Tor was stumbling upon a horrific, sickening page called Human Experiments. I don't remember where exactly I found it. It was buried deep somewhere in a link archive page. The homepage described the content on the site. I was distraught at what I was reading. It said in a red, bloody font, "The experiments conducted for this website are to prove that not all humans are born equal. The people chosen to be experimented on were usually homeless, but also the unfortunate souls that happened to get caught by these sick fucks." These so-called experiments ranged from starvation and water restriction, reactions to extreme pain, and torture infections and diseases, and even infant tolerances to X-rays, pain, and heat. I had seen all those horrific, shocked videos, like 3 guys, 1 hammer, so I thought I would be prepared for what I was going to see, but I wasn't. I made the mistake of clicking on the first link to the experiment photos I honestly had to retain the urge to puke. I don't want to even give a description of what I saw, but I'll just say there were innocent victims, people just like you and I going through horrible, horrible things that nobody should ever go through. Against my better judgment, I scrolled the entire page, and it only got worse. Pretty soon, a whole section dedicated to infants and toddlers came up. I had somehow made it to the bottom of the page, and then a little box popped up on the screen. I didn't know what it was until a line of text popped up. The text said,
"Did you enjoy the site?"
I realized there was a chat box. I typed, "Who is this?" The stranger promptly replied, evading my question by saying,
"What was your favorite part of the site?"
I asked the same question again. This time he actually acknowledged my question and told me he was the site owner. I told him that this was sick and inhumane and that I would report this site immediately. That was my biggest mistake, telling him that, because after a short pause, he finally said, I see your name is Michael and you live in Massachusetts." He was right, but instead of clicking out of that browser right away, I typed in, "No, you're wrong." About 10 seconds later, he typed something that made my heart feel like it shriveled up, and that was my address. My complete, correct home address. His final words were, "Have a nice day." I closed the browser and slammed my laptop shut. I called the police first thing, before even telling my parents when the cops got to our house. I explained everything to everyone at once. They wanted to see my computer, since I didn't remember the link to the website. Unfortunately, the Tor browser doesn't save your browsing history, so I couldn't even help them in shutting down this website. The cops told us that if what I said was true, that we should find another place to stay as soon as possible. Thankfully, this was around the time that we were looking to move away anyway. I couldn't believe how fast my parents were able to sell the house and find another. I apologized to them every day for a month after this happened. I hated to have to make them go through this all. I like to think the gun that chat was just bluffing, but I couldn't take the chance. I don't think anybody should ever look into the deep web, as there is no good to come of it. There used to be a website on the dark web called the Silk Road. It was an underground illegal drug marketplace. I had heard about it through friends that had used it. Our weed dealer was moving out of state, and he was our only connection. So my friends started using this website and claimed that it was legit. The timing couldn't be better to score some pot, since my parents were in Atlantic City for the weekend. I downloaded the Tor browser and checked it out. The biggest seller on the site was cannabis, of course. I left a comment on one of the newer listings asking for anybody to tell me if the listing was legit. I came back to the site About an hour later, and I had one new message. It was from a user named IlEB. He saw my comment and offered to sell me an ounce for a really low price, but he only does local. I've done local deals before, and I've never really had a problem with them, so I told him that I was in Washington. Turned out he lived only about an hour away from me. I suggested we meet halfway, but shockingly he said he would just meet me in my hometown. I couldn't turn down that offer. He said he would be over after work around 9 o'clock. I told him to meet me in the Wendy's parking lot. He asked me a bunch of weird questions like my address, who I live with. I definitely didn't want to give my address to a pot dealer, and I lied and told him I lived alone. A little bit later, he texted me telling me he found a much better place to do the deal. It was behind an old closed-down retail store at the edge of town. My sketchiness alarm was going off, but I was so desperate to get that gris. I knew exactly where that building was, so I drove over and got there within 5 minutes. I parked the car behind the building but couldn't see anyone else there. Then I got a text saying he was on his way that made no sense, because if he lived an hour away, how would he know of this place? I sat there for like 20 minutes, trying to get another response from him, but he never answered. I decided to just give it up. I had a feeling something sketchy was going on, and that I should just leave while I still could. It took me 10 minutes to get back home. My front door was open. I knew I had shut it, so I was worried that my parents had gotten home early. I parked my car in the driveway since my dad didn't take it and went back inside. The light upstairs and my parents' bedroom was on, and I heard some kind of shuffling noise. I shouted to Mom and Dad, and the noise stopped. The door to the room slammed shut, and I knew something was wrong. My dad's car wasn't even in sight, and now he's not answering. It took me long enough to realize that whoever was in there wasn't either one of my parents. Since I'm a straight-up idiot, I grabbed a carving knife from the kitchen and charged upstairs to my parents' room. I practically almost broke down the door after slamming it open. I didn't see anyone, but I right away picked up on the fact that my mom's jewelry case was opened. I grabbed the phone in my parents' room and called 911, but something grabbed me from under the bed. I used the knife in my hand to stab their arm, and the man under the bed began to scream in agony. Since it was a corded phone, I couldn't leave the room with it. All I had time to tell the police was that someone broke into my house and then gave them my address. The man crawled out from under the bed with the knife still in his arm. He didn't even look at me. He just ran straight for the front door into his car. The best I could describe him was that he was a black man with a backwards hat and raggy clothing. Then he drove a black Honda Accord. Of course, I couldn't tell the police much. I couldn't bring up the website as it was illegal to use it. All I could do was describe him to the best of my ability, so he's still out there home free. I can only guess he got my address by hacking me somehow. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe for more.